Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of sources and really try to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge for you.
And today we're doing a deep dive into excerpts from Good Arguments. It's by Bo Seo, who's actually a two-time world debating champion.
Right, so our mission here, basically, is to explore how we can maybe learn to disagree a bit better in our everyday lives.
Yeah, by looking at competitive debate, the art, the practice, guided by Bo Seo's own story and, his insights.
And the sources, they're a real mix. You get personal stories, lessons from debating, thoughts on public arguments. It's part memoir, part how-to.
Definitely. And there are some surprising moments in there, stuff you'll probably find pretty relatable.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Bo Seo's story. It really starts in a place a lot of people can understand, right? Moving to a new country.
Exactly. He came from South Korea to Australia when he was 8.
And he talks about how tough live conversation in English was at first.
Oh, yeah. The speed, the rhythm. It wasn't just like the words. He says it made conflict feel incredibly complex, almost unmanageable.
It just added another layer of difficulty onto just expressing himself.
Right. He mentions these early playground mock arguments, white bread versus rice, that kind of thing.
Classic kid stuff.
Yeah, and they started out fun, like exploring differences. But he notes that when it became, real disagreements, his English just wasn't quite there, especially in those kinds of zero-sum playground standoffs.
And he felt like crossing language lines meant tiny things. A wrong word, a gesture someone misread could suddenly make him seem at odds instead of just odd.
Which led to this strong conflict aversion.
Yeah.
He found arguing embarrassing, kind of pointless, red faces, flying spittle. He actually mentions that.
He really thought avoiding arguments was the way to go.
Totally. But then this pivotal moment, kind of ironic, really, 5th grade, his teacher, Ms. Wright, announces a new debate activity.
And Bo volunteers, but only to avoid getting into an argument with her about something else.
Yeah, talk about conflict aversion leading you somewhere unexpected. And Ms. Wright, she gave this really clear instruction that, well, it changed things for him.
What was it?
She told them, draw 6 columns in your notebook, 1 for each speaker. Write down everything said. And the basic rule was simple. Every argument requires a response, simply for having been raised.
Wow. Okay, so that immediately puts structure on it.
Right. It structures the chaos and sets this baseline. You have to engage with what the other person says.
That's fascinating.
And she was clear about judging, too. It wasn't about which side you were on or who was talking. It was about the quality of the arguments.
Separating the argument from the arguer. That's key.
It's a core principle, yeah. And for Bo, standing up in that first debate, the topic was banning all zoos, seeing the audience, seeing the adjudicator ready to listen.
Yeah.
He writes that, for the first time since moving to Australia, he felt like he might be heard.
You can see why that feeling would be powerful, why debate would hook him.
Totally. And it wasn't just about winning, although obviously that's part of it in competition.
Right.
He talks about getting hooked on the whole thing, the prep room epiphanies, that feeling of connecting with the audience, the animal thrill of chasing and being chased with ideas. It became this whole passion.
High school, though, brought its own challenges. Social stuff, the pressure to win constantly.
And wrestling with that trap of, tying your self-worth completely to how well you do in debates. He mentions the stress around trying out for the state team.
Yeah, the source points out this sort of reward cycle in debate.
Yeah.
You improve, you get instant feedback, your opponent looks stunned, the coach nods, people clap.
But the downside, what he calls the poison trace, is how easily you start thinking your success in debating is your whole value as a person.
That's a really crucial distinction to make. So fast forward to university, Harvard, a hyperverbal place, he calls it.
Yeah, arguments weren't just for class. They were how you performed, proved points, sized each other up. Debate was just everywhere.
And he contrasts his past with his friend Jonah, who he calls an anti-debater.
Right. Jonah prioritized feelings, intuition, picked sides based on his gut, not structured argument. He went more toward activism.
While Bo went deeper into formal debate, so their approaches to disagreement really split off.
Definitely. Then after university at Tsinghua, he mentions feeling a bit lost back home, looking at job ads, not seeing where his debate skills fit.
That period seems important, his view on argument started shifting beyond just the competition aspect.
Yeah, I think so. It shifted towards seeing argument as, a vital tool for just engaging with the world productively, not just a game to win.
Okay, so that brings us neatly to the core idea of the book.
which is that competitive debate, with all its rules and structures, can actually teach us how to disagree better, in real life.
And the goal isn't necessarily winning every time or even avoiding fights altogether. It's more modest, but maybe more useful.
Exactly. He puts it like this. We should disagree in such a way that the outcome of having the disagreement is better than not having it at all.
That makes sense. Just aiming for better than silence or better than a shouting match.
Right. And conflict aversion, which, let's face it, a lot of us feel. It might seem practical, like keeping the peace.
Sure.
But the book suggests it can actually come from a darker view, like a belief that disagreements can't be productive, that they're just bound to be messy or destructive.
Or maybe that people just can't be trusted to handle disagreement well.
Yeah, that too. Fundamentally, maybe a lack of trust.
So framing argument as a vote of confidence, that's a really interesting phrase from the source.
It is, isn't it? It implies when you choose to argue, you're actually showing faith. Faith in yourself and faith in your opponent.
Believing they deserve your honesty and that they can handle it.
Right. That they deserve your candor and can receive it gracefully. It requires, well, faith in the whole process.
Okay, so the source offers some practical tools, right? Pulled from debate, but useful every day.
Yeah, a whole toolkit. Let's get into some of them.
All right. First up, structuring your points. Debate has this rule: no buried leads.
Meaning, basically start with your main point, your conclusion. Get it out up front. Don't make people wait and wonder where you're going.
Okay, lead with the headline.
Exactly. And then to make sure your point is strong, there's this checklist, the 4 W's.
What are those?
What, when, who cares, and why.
Okay, what is your claim? When is the context? Who cares?
Feels a bit blunt.
It does. But it forces you to think about the significance. Why does this matter? Who is affected? What are the consequences? And why is your reasoning, your evidence?
So it's a quick check. Is my argument actually complete? Does it have impact?
Pretty much. Ensures it has substance and relevance.
Makes sense. What's next in the toolkit?
Understanding the terrain. This comes from how debate really emphasizes analyzing the topic carefully. It's about figuring out exactly what the disagreement is actually about.
Yeah. There's that great story in the source about him arguing with his father. And his dad asks, do I really have to spell it out? And Beau realizes, yeah, actually you do. Exactly. Naming the specific point of contention, spelling it out. It didn't magically resolve the argument, but it focused it, made it clearer.
They argued late, but it felt more productive because they were finally arguing about the same thing.
Right. It's not about erasing differences, but just getting to a more functional disagreement. Less talking past each other.
I feel so familiar. Okay, what else? Engaging the opposition. Rebuttal.
Yeah. And that fundamental rule from Ms. Wright comes back. Every argument requires a response.
So you can't just ignore what the other person says.
Nope. And debate gives you ways to structure that response. You can argue their point is untrue, or maybe it's true, but unimportant, or that it's outweighed by something else you bring up.
So it gives you categories for responding directly, instead of just repeating yourself or attacking the person.
Precisely. Which leads into the next point, the power of listening.
Which debate kind of forces you to do, right? With things like points of information, where you have to listen to ask a relevant question mid-speech.
Exactly. And the source really makes a case against interrupting in normal conversations. It argues it's almost always counterproductive.
Why is that?
Well, you might miss their actual point if they're building up to it. Plus, they immediately feel unheard, get defensive.
And you lose any chance of actually persuading them.
Right. And here's a sharp insight. The book suggests interrupting often comes from an instinct for power, but it's rooted in fragility.
Fragility. How so?
Like you interrupt because you're afraid of what their words might do to the listeners, or maybe even to your own certainty, so you shut them down.
You give up the chance to maybe win their mind later, just to make sure you don't feel like you're losing right now by letting them speak.
Yeah, it kind of flips who's actually feeling weak in that moment.
Interesting. Okay, one more tool. The side switch.
This is where you deliberately try to adopt your opponent's perspective.
So not just poking holes from your side.
No, it's more like actively trying to walk in their shoes. Trying to understand how a reasonable person, someone like you, maybe, if circumstances were different, could genuinely arrive at their belief. How does it feel subjectively reasonable to them?
And the point isn't necessarily to agree with them or change your own mind.
Not necessarily. The book frames it as developing sound conviction through mature reflection. Really understanding why someone holds a different view, even if you still disagree, actually deepens your own understanding of the whole issue.
Now, these tools are great, but Let's be honest, not all arguments or arguers are working in good faith.
Oh, absolutely not. The sources talk about some difficult styles you run into in debate and definitely out in the world.
Okay, like who? First up, the twister.
Yeah, this is your classic straw man builder, someone who distorts what you said to make it easier to attack.
Like the example giving, taking right to own a firearm and twisting it into you want to sacrifice communal safety.
Exactly. And they often try to push the burden of proof onto you for claims you never even made.
So what's the counter? What do debaters do?
The main tactic is to correct the record. Calmly, clearly restate your original point. Explicitly point out the distortion. My point was X, you seem to be portraying it as Y, and then insist on returning to your actual argument.
Don't chase the straw man down the rabbit hole.
Right, just name the behavior, correct it, and refocus.
Okay. Then there's the wrangler.
Ah, yes. All attack, no positive case. They're brilliant at finding flaws, nitpicking, tearing things down.
But they never build anything themselves, never offer their own alternative.
Exactly. The source actually mentions this style has ancient roots. The Nyaya Sutras in Sanskrit apparently distinguished good debate from just wrangling by critics who only tear down.
Huh. Okay, and maybe the trickiest, the brawler.
Yeah, the ones who thrive on chaos. They use theatrics, misstate things deliberately, interrupt constantly, shout lies, or wrong.
The source uses the Nixon-Khrushchev kitchen debate as an example.
Khrushchev was apparently constantly interrupting, shouting, being disruptive.
And Nixon's tactic
Was to stop and name the behavior. At one point, he actually called Khrushchev a filibusterer. The idea is to try and impose some structure by pointing out how the process itself is breaking down.
And crucially, you name the behavior, the twisting, the wrangling, the brawling.
Yes. Not the person. You say, that's misrepresenting my point, not you're a liar. Avoid the ad hominem, otherwise you just descend into the brawl yourself.
So shifting gears a bit, moving from these one-on-one dynamics to broader societal arguments. How does this stuff apply in the public square?
Well, the sources definitely touch on that. There's a really relatable example mentioned, the apparent decline of cross-partisan Thanksgiving dinner discourse after the 2016 U.S. election.
Right, I remember reading about that study, suggesting families with opposing political views literally cut their dinners shorter.
Yeah, by like 30-50 minutes, according to one study cited. It's a stark image of how disagreement can actually shrink our shared time and space.
Wow, that says a lot.
And the source contrasts different views on handling this. You have someone like Thomas Hobbes centuries ago basically saying disagreement itself is offensive. His solution: civil silence on really divisive stuff like religion, just to keep society from falling apart.
Keep the peace by not talking about the hard things.
Pretty much. Which is a stark contrast to a view from someone in the debate world, a guy named Dale mentioned in the book.
What's his take?
He argued debate shouldn't be a space safe from disagreement, but rather a safe space to disagree. As long as certain ground rules are kept, like critically, not questioning the equal moral standing of people involved.
So his view is more like, if we avoid all the hard topics because they're uncomfortable, where do we talk about them?
Exactly. Where can those necessary, difficult conversations actually happen?
The sources also track the perception of rhetoric itself, right? How it's changed.
Yeah, it used to be this really respected art, central to education. John Quincy Adams taught rhetoric at Harvard. Old man eloquent.
But now
Often, rhetoric is used dismissively. Oh, that's just mere rhetoric, as opposed to supposedly straight talk or no spin.
even though straight talk is often its own form of rhetoric.
Absolutely. And it echoes ancient concerns, too, like Socrates worrying that rhetoric could persuade people without being tied to truth.
Which connects maybe uncomfortably to that argumentative theory of reasoning.
Right. The controversial idea that our ability to reason didn't evolve primarily for solitary truth-finding.
But to win arguments,
Uh,
to persuade others in a group.
yeah. Making things like confirmation bias not so much a bug in our thinking, but maybe a feature designed for social persuasion. It suggests we're built for arguing together, not necessarily thinking perfectly alone.
Okay, so given all that, what about modern attempts to make disagreement better, especially online?
The sources highlight a couple of interesting examples. One is the Reddit community, Change My View. Change My View.
I've heard of that. What's the core idea?
It's pretty simple. Someone posts a view they hold, but crucially, they state they are genuinely open to having it changed.
Okay. Then others debate it, following strict rules about civility and substance. And if someone does successfully change the original poster's mind, even partially, the poster awards them a delta symbol, the Greek letter O. Ah, so there's a reward mechanism for actually shifting perspective, not just for shouting loudest.
Exactly. It tries to incentivize genuine engagement and reward minds being changed, which is rare online. And the site apparently tries to promote whole threads, not just individual zingers.
That's clever. Oh, any other examples?
Yeah, Audrey Tang and the V Taiwan platform in Taiwan, it uses tech for basically digital democracy and structured public deliberation on policy issues.
How does that work?
It involves stages like finding rough consensus, identifying the core points of disagreement, and then having moderated discussions focused on mutual respect. It's an attempt to really institutionalize better disagreement using digital tools.
So, taking these ideas of structure and rules,
Yeah.
can we apply them beyond just conversations, like to institutions?
Yeah, the source argues we can and should, applying debate principles within organizations, even government.
What would that look like? What principles are we talking about?
Things like establishing clear forums or spaces for these debates to happen, clarifying the actual goals, what are we trying to achieve with this disagreement, monitoring the process for fairness, ensuring a level playing field, and this is key, being responsive to the outcome. The argument has to actually lead somewhere.
Okay, are there examples of this happening?
A few are mentioned. Warren Buffett apparently often hires two different advisors for potential acquisitions, one to argue for it, one to argue against it, building in that structured opposition.
Like a formal devil's advocate?
Kind of, yeah. Or how the U.S. intelligence community, after major failures, started commissioning red teams or experts specifically tasked with arguing alternative analyses, challenging the main view.
Baking dissent into the process.
Exactly. And then there's that amazing anecdote about IBM's Project Debater, the AI.
Oh, right. The machine that debated a human champion.
Yeah. And the source describes its voice as elegant, feminine. The topic was subsidizing preschool.
Okay. How did the debate go? What was the difference in approach?
Well, the machine, Project Debater, apparently framed its arguments largely around ideals. The moral case, the long-term benefits for society, the vision.
And the human champion.
He focused much more on the practicalities, the trade-offs, the costs, the budget issues, implementation challenges.
That's a fascinating contrast.
It really is. And it raises a question, doesn't it? If we only focus on the immediate practicalities, do we miss something important, like the potential costs of not acting? Or the value of striving for an ideal, even if it's hard? The machine sort of forced that perspective.
So we live in a world with, as the source puts it, maybe too many opportunities to disagree. Endless online arguments, constant news cycles.
Mm-hmm. Which makes knowing which disagreements are even worth having incredibly important. Choosing your battles.
And does debate help with that?
The argument is yes, because it forces you to focus on the quality of the argument, requires listening and responding. It gives you a filter. It helps you recognize bad faith arguments or pointless ones, and maybe focus your energy where productive discussion is actually possible.
And there was that line that the real debate within the debate is often choosing which points to contest.
Yeah, out of maybe 100 potential disagreements in any complex issue, the skill is picking the crucial ones, the ones that really matter, and letting the minor ones go. Knowing when and where to engage is a huge part of disagreeing well.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, drawing from Bosayo's story, from the world of competitive debate, the big takeaway isn't about becoming some kind of unbeatable argument machine.
No, definitely not. And it's not about just avoiding conflict either. It's more about getting a set of tools, a mindset maybe, to engage with people you disagree with in a way that's more structured, clearer.
And hopefully more productive, or at least less destructive.
Exactly. Aiming for an outcome that's better than just yelling past each other, or worse, silence. And that's a skill that feels pretty essential, whether you're talking family stuff or, public life.
And Bokyo's own journey really shows that, doesn't it? How this structured approach helps him go from feeling unheard, actively avoiding conflict,
to finding his voice, connecting with people through disagreement, but doing it within shared rules with mutual respect baked in.
Right. So here's a final thought for you, the listener, to maybe mull over, drawn from the sources.
Despite all the criticisms over centuries, people dismissing it as spin, worrying about manipulation, the source notes that debate or rhetoric had never been defeated. It endures.
So what does that enduring power tell us about us? About the human need to argue, to persuade, to connect, maybe just to be heard, even when it's really, really difficult.
Something to think about.
Definitely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.